the victim mentality will destroy your entire life. It will destroy your life before your life even begins. And unfortunately, we're living in a day and age where this message is not only being perpetuated, but it is being pedestalized. Like it is trendy to be a victim. This is what the woke ideology has done, the far left or liberal ideology has done. It has made it the in thing. If you want to get attention, if you want to be seen as valuable, if you want to be perceived as somebody who is acceptable, all you have to do is to scream to the world how big of a victim you are, how oppressed you are, and you will get that attention somewhere. Now, we have this app they have this app that they've created, or I guess it's been out, but now it's being utilized, called Blue Sky, right? It is basically a deviation, an exodus from X, what was known as Twitter. I'll still be calling it Twitter and tweets, so it is what it is. So people came from Twitter, exodused into Blue Sky, and they've made it a pure victimhood echo chamber. Now, we're all living in echo chambers. Don't get that twisted. The difference is, what is your echo chamber delivering to you? Is it giving you a message of you can or you can't? Is it giving you a message of you are the control of your life? You have agency over your life, or is it saying that you can do nothing and you must rely on external forces to change in order for your life to change? You are a victim. That's the biggest differentiating factor between the difference between these two echo chambers. And it's deviated into politics and it's found its way into political movements, etc., but it's bigger than politics. This is a social aspect. This is to do with us as humans and how we are evolving and devolving. And unfortunately, there's a massive number of individuals who have devolved back into a place of victimhood. In the day and age where life is easier than it's ever been, even in developing countries, what a third world country is today is what the Western world was, let's say, 300-400 years ago. Straight up. And probably it's even better in third world countries today. So if you're living in the West in 2024 and beyond, you are living in the most privileged time in all of human history. I'm not saying that as an exaggeration. By every statistical measurement, we are living in the very best time there has ever been. I've been reading the Thomas Jefferson's biography, and there's many scenes in there where he and his wife, let's say, have a child, and then 2 pages later, it's like, oh, and then the child passes away. And this happens multiple times. They had potential of having 8 to 10 kids, but only 2 of them survived. And I thought to myself, I'm like, this is terrifying. Like, what kind of a world would that be? And yet that was the norm. In history, even the lifespans of people, somebody being 40 years old was a rarity in those day and ages, especially depending on where you were environment-wise. And so children even living, the mortality rate for children, I believe at some point in history was like 50%. It was a 50-50 toss-up. Now there is still, yes, is complications, etc. in this day and age, but it's barely even 1% of what it once was because of the privileges of this modern day that we were born into. And it blows my mind when the same people who are born into this privilege are the same ones who cannot see it, are the same ones who complain about it over and over again. Now, I'm an immigrant. I was born in a quote-unquote third world country in Zimbabwe. I moved to South Africa at 5 years old, and at 10, we, were grateful enough. We were privileged enough to receive a green card. We moved to the States, went through the process and finally got naturalized. And that gives me a certain perspective on the world that's a little different than those who are just born into this. So I'm able to kind of draw the reference of back home and here, back home and here, especially as a grown man. I can now see it more clearly because I want to see it. And because, I now have decisions to make, which is, okay, am I going to buy into this, ideology of I'm oppressed because I'm black and, things are so terrible? Or am I actually going to use any of my experiences to fuel me? And it's a no-brainer for me at this point in time. But yet, so many people who are born into this privilege in a place where Multis of billions of people are trying to break into a country like this or to find their way into a country like this in some means, in some measure. People will get on boats and rafts and cross the seven seas just to have the opportunity to get in. Not even the certainty that they're going to get on the shore and they're going to find their way into a place like America or the UK or, different places in the West. And yet, we are the most ungrateful, victim minded, and we wonder why the generation that we're currently living in, not saying Gen Z, I actually think, many of them are switching and flipping the tide, but in this era, we have the least amount of gratitude with the most amount of blessings. It's almost like it's like what you call it, like a relativity curve, right? On that graph, where it's like the more privileged we become, the more ungrateful we become simultaneously. It is such an interesting thing to witness when you have kids on their iPhone 14, 15, 16 tweeting, or I guess now they're blue skying. Oh, they actually call it something else. Some real nasty and freaky. You're going to have to look that up for yourself. They call it some real nasty and freaky, which shows you the mentality of these types of people. But they are, they are posting their content about how oppressive this nation is, about how oppressed they are, about how terrible things are. I saw one of Steven Crowder, he was going over this entire blue sky situation. And he pointed out one of these messages where somebody was talking about, how the lack of children being affirmed as trans is this great transgression, no pun intended, or is this great sin within society. And they use wording which is nothing more than what they've always been doing. They use what you call it, they use euphemisms such as hate speech, right? When it is free speech, they will label something hate speech that they don't want to hear. They use euphemisms such as reproductive rights instead of abortion or the deletion of babies, which is what it is, right? They will use a certain cadence. So they say gender affirming surgeries instead of genital mutilation. This is how these people are operating. And these are the same ones who live in a country where you can be that and you don't have to fear being imprisoned and deleted by your own government. It was mind-blowing to see this case of Dylan Mulvaney, right? Some of y'all might know. If you don't, then you're living under a beautiful utopian rock and stay there. But this individual was a boy who was calling himself a girl for a very long time on social media, etc. And he was propped up by society, by the machine. They had him on, different ad campaigns, and then it became the Bud Light thing. And, most of Bud Light's fans were pissed off because obviously they knew they were trying to push this propaganda that didn't reflect and actually insulted their own audience. And maybe a year or so ago, this Dylan character ends up going to Peru. And they say, finally, I can, be in a place where I'm free, blah, blah, blah. Well, it turns out that Peru actually notices or recognizes that way of life as a mental illness, and you would be in a 5150 at best. You would be in some sort of insane asylum, something of the likeness of Gotham Asylum. You understand me? That's where you would be stationed if you were to live that way. So you live in a country where, look, we just don't want you to bring it to us. We just don't want you to have our children being, ushered into and groomed into these situations. That's all we ask. You live in a place where you can go about your life and be what you want to be and do what you want to do as a grown adult. We just don't want you doing a damn thing with the kiddos. These are the people who are calling themselves oppressed. It is the black folks who are going through life with more opportunities than most of the people in this country because they've bullied their way into it, right? Especially the far left. The BLM movement, etc., was like fuel to the fire. And everybody became on edge. Everybody was afraid. And so, there was no level of accountability left. These are the same people who will sit in Congress and complain about the injustices. They will sit in their mayor offices, the Brandon Johnsons and the Brandon Scotts of the world, and they will complain about how terrible their people have it. in positions of power, they will say these things. That's where we've gotten, folks. That's where we've gotten. And that mentality, that victim mentality that's become pervasive within our society, it is the very same thing that is keeping these individuals in that toxic, detrimental, and dysfunctional cycle that they feel they cannot escape. It is the only thing that's keeping them there. And so long as you perpetuate that woe is me, I cannot do for self, I am oppressed mentality, you will have a self-fulfilling destiny. Like your life is going to unfold in parallel with that belief system. You can't deviate from something that you're not willing to separate yourself from. If you continue to be a victim in your story, you will continue to manifest a life in which you are a victim. It is that simple. Is it to say that, we don't call things out? Absolutely not. But how about calling out the true injustices or the true civil right, the lack of people's civil rights, the lack of human rights in a multitude of countries around the planet? What about that part? That would be a great start, as opposed to complaining about it in one of the most liberal and liberated and free countries on the globe.
I used to be afraid of the dark, a place unknown like a heart in their heart. I used to see my life in the bar. Now the kids unchained, every shackle is lost. 2 steps in the moonlight, 2 step in the daytime. You just know when it feel right. You got a feeling the time's not. See you through those shades that I just threw on. Through my lenses, you just can't do no wrong. I fell in love with myself again. I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 3-6-5, that's a full rotation. I see you looking up.